Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Voltron Legendary Defender episode reviews. This one's for Season 4, Episode 4, 5, and 6, which are The Voltron Show, Begin the Blitz, and A New Defender. So, I've already done my previous video, which focused on the first half of the season, and then this is for the second half of the season. So, I think these last three episodes were a pretty big disappointment compared to the first three. And even though arguably bigger things potentially happened in this group of episodes, the first half felt a little bit like better with regards to overall kind of where things are going. Here, it felt like it was all style with very little substance, in that we didn't really advance many of the bigger plots going on, and I suppose the cliffhanger being like, oh, now here's Luthor's motivations, now maybe we'll learn about him. It's kind of like, okay, I get that given that these seasons are much shorter, having that be the cliffhanger, but really after season 3, that group of episodes, I really feel like Luthor's motivation should have been like present here within this group. Equally, I felt like they should have done something more with like Haggar on Nerva. It was cool at the end how, okay, Altean technology, she's using that to kind of potentially blow up a section of the Galra Empire to take out, people who've taken it over. That, speaks to how cruel and evil the Galra is, that they've implanted potentially these bombs in a couple of planets at certain points in their empire, just in case they are taken over to take out whoever's taking them over. But it didn't really move anything along in that, like, what does Haggar getting her memories back do to this season? It doesn't really do anything. Equally, Zarkon, once again, has been made into just this completely one-dimensional character who only knows one thing. He went from being, oh, I'm after the Black Line, to now being, I'm after Luthor, for very little reason as well. So he just doesn't feel like much of a character once again, in that, like, the last episode from Season 3 is the best Zarkon we've seen, and that is seeing how he went from there to there, from being, like, good, a paladin of Voltron, to being, the character that he is now. This, as he is now, he just feels so uninteresting. Haggar still feels far and away like the more interesting of that group. They didn't really delve into the whole, evil thing controlling them potentially at all. That might come up again, but just a Haggar being Altean, I don't really know what we're meant to take away from it as such. In that, Luthor did reveal that Nerva is his mother, which I thought was, like, interesting enough, but you need to give context to when you say something like that, because when when you say Nerva, it suggests so many things when he says that line. It suggests that either he doesn't know that his mother's alive anymore, which means that he probably doesn't know that Haggar is Nerva. Now, it also doesn't confirm to us, like, how old Luthor is either. Like, he could have been, like, born all those years ago and then, like, kept in stasis for a long time, or he could have been born much more recently, but then why was he told that his mother is on Nerva when it's actually Haggar? So that's really, really confusing. I appreciate them saying that line from him, and him knowing basically the backstory of, like, what happened to Dibazal, but it was just very, again, it's very secretive with their information this season. Equally, like, I praised the first episode of this season in the previous video for what they did with Keith and, like, separating him to potentially have a bit of an arc of his own. The problem is they didn't go back to him, really. He was involved with the rebels, basically, the Blades of Marmora, in the attack at the end, but he just felt kind of like a support character until they were about to do the big sacrifice moment with him. And I wasn't really sure what I was meant to, like, take away from that. So I'm kind of still waiting with Keith for, like, the moment where they properly have, like, some sort of a, like, Blades of Marmora ceremony for him, or they finally have him get that backstory with his mother. We're still waiting for that, of course. I appreciated Lance getting that moment in the finale of him being the one to talk about how like Allura is the heart of Voltron. I appreciated her acknowledging that it was Lance who basically said that to her. But again, for the most part, that was Lance's main involvement in like this entire season. Similarly with Hunk, he had like a little thing or two that he did, but for the most part wasn't in any way of a focus. Whereas the likes of like Allura got moments, Shiro as the leader got moments, Paige got an episode, Keith got an episode, but two of our characters feel like they almost can't do episodes with them, and that feels very disappointing because I think Lance especially is a character who I think a lot of fans are interested in. They want to know more about him, but they just refuse to do anything with him. The Shiro was interesting in that, once again, no real allusion at all to potentially any of the conspiracy theories, even in the second half of the season. You're always waiting for something to happen with him, but it seems like right now they're just presenting it as, no, Shiro's back. Maybe it was a bit confusing how he came back, but as far as we're aware, he's back. But in the background of, I think, everyone's mind, they know something's up with how he managed to come back to the group. Equally, I think going back to Luthor a bit, the other thing with him this season was him and his group. I get why they'd be cautious as soon as that announcement went out from Zarkon that everyone is meant to hunt down Luthor, and if they're with him, they're at risk as well. And given that he did kill one of them earlier on in the season because of the kind of spying thing from Haggar, which again, like, I felt like that should have been explained a little bit more. Of like, I think most people have made the connection of like the cat is the cat, Onerva's cat, or what? And then was it what's her name, Narvi, something like that? With her, like, what was she? Like, it was just such a weird way to kill off a character. And then I get why it would make the other three be very cautious around Luthor, in that, oh, Luthor is more cruel than we thought. He's going to take us all out to get what he wants. You see, the part of his plan was to go into that dimension to get unlimited quintessence. But then when it fails, they just turn on him immediately. And again, like even with Oxia, who's definitely presented as the most interesting of his crew, you think something important's going to happen, but then she kind of just goes ahead with what the other two were planning to do and, knocks him out. He manages to escape, of course, and he's kind of on his own now, but he still kind of has his goals and we don't really know what they are. So as cool as the moment at the end of like him kind of being the new defender coming in to save the day, stop the bomb, stop the systems and everyone being destroyed, it very much is a case of like, I really don't know what to take from that, because we still now, season 3 gone, season 4 gone, don't know what Luthor is really about. It was interesting that he wanted quintessence, but like, to what end? What are the ships for? What's his plan? What is the connection now with him and his team? Because it feels like it doesn't mean anything now, that they were so willing to just turn against him the second anything went wrong, and the fact that he's kind of somewhat willing to take them out. But what meaning is there? I think they made a mistake there, in that I almost felt like it was meant to be this much more important relationship, that they weren't all like pure blood Galrans as we got confirmed last season, and he's meant to be this much more open kind of character, and now they're kind of doing a kind of different path with him. Cool that he wants to meet with everyone, and hopefully he reveals to some extent some key piece of information, some key plan, but I don't really know where they're heading with it. Episode 4 I thought was a mistake. I get what they were going for, in that they needed to have somewhat of a focus on how Team Voltron as one team manages to spread their kind of goal, their intent across the galaxy and turn people against the Galrans. You didn't need to do a full episode taking away from a 6-episode season to have that comedic episode with only one serious scene really in the whole thing. I thought it was a relatively poor use of an episode, in that I feel like they could have just had that happen in the background, like across the first 4 episodes of the season. You could have just had like that sort of stuff more or less be happening in the background. Kind of like they did in the first few episodes where we got this idea that they were putting on these shows. To have a whole episode devoted to it, I thought was a huge mistake, because it took away from everything. It's an episode where, like, you know, after the first 3 episodes being quite intense, they just forget about that stuff, have that episode, and then almost forget about that going into the next episode. Admittedly, you know, they sort of used it in that, like, oh, our show got this many systems on board. Now there's this line that kind of cuts off like a third of the Galran Empire. If we get this last one planet, we basically have control of a third of the Empire back. Interesting connection. You didn't need a whole episode to set up that one moment. And it's another case of, like, this is a kind of Star Wars Rebels problem as well. When the whole intent of, like, an episode is just to progress the rebellion a little bit more, it just doesn't have as much meaning as, like, a character-focused episode or proper plot. And where we are right now, the plot is kind of non-existent. Like, it's very much dependent on what Luthor says to the coalition and how they treat him, because other than that, like, it's Keith and his very personal journey. Whenever they decide to do that, there's a lot of stuff happening, so I don't know when they're going to get the chance to do that. Finding Paige and Matt's father, when are they going to get the time to do that? You know, will they ever go back to Earth? What's happening with Earth, I think, is another thing. And then it's just revealing stuff about Zarkon and Haggar on Irva. Because they really need to do something with Zarkon and not just give him a new weapon that's more powerful than the last big weapon he had. You need to characterize Zarkon badly now, because he just feels like, you know, generic villain. That nothing meant anything, basically, based off last thing. In that, as I said, like, one of the big things, this is just like, what was the point of almost like giving, you know, Haggar her Onirva memories back if she's not going to do anything with them? So I think this season ended on a relatively disappointing note of just not bringing the series really to a place where all that much is, it feels like all that much is going to happen. They just, I don't think, covered enough ground here, and I'm very confused about, like, kind of what this season was, like, meant to be. What is it meant to be, like, the second half of season 3? Are season 3 and 4 meant to be a thing? Because it doesn't feel that way. So is it meant to be a thing where, like, actually no, the end of season 4 is like the mid-season of an actual season, and it'll be season 5 and 6 that finish off whatever we were dealing with there. I'm very confused about what the production order is on this show, and, like, what is a finale versus what isn't a finale, because they seem to be kind of having a finale for each season, but it not being particularly clear, like, which is a mid-season finale, which is a season finale. I think we're meant to assume that the flashback episode from last time out from season 3 was a mid-season finale, and that this was the finale. This didn't have as much to it as other finales, though, which was a bit of a problem. I think it is just a case of, like, very little setup for a lot of the stuff that was happening. That, like, Keith's sacrifice was just kind of like, after the first episode, Keith felt like he just went from being a main character to being, like, a minor character, and then we're meant to, like, be like, oh, Keith's gonna kill himself. Like, okay, I get you feel you have to make this sacrifice, but and he has a connection to everyone else, but, like, why is this happening now? It goes back in episode 4 for just, like, being this unnecessary episode, spending that much time. I think you could have maybe had episode 4 include a good amount of that stuff, but cover other ground as well, because it was just really, really unnecessary. I appreciated some of the humor in the episode and that they had fun with it, for sure, but the timing for that episode was so bad. It was so not needed at that point in time. Tonally, to have that sort of an episode, it was all over the place, in my opinion. And especially the whole core of the episode really coming from, like, you know, Karan getting this brain worm from that guy. It was just, it felt like a filler episode in a season with only 6 episodes that does not need a filler episode. So I think my overall conclusion with this season is that we just need more information. We need information about Luthor, about Haggar, about Zarkon. We need to cover more ground with more characters and really get the series to a place where like there's a direction to where we're going, because right now it doesn't feel like there's that much of a direction. It's just your kind of generic big faction against big faction type thing. And while it's cool that they are fighting for like control of the galaxy, it's such this massive thing that they're covering in such a few amount of episodes. It doesn't have as much meaning as perhaps maybe they think it does. In that they're talking about like a third of this galaxy spanning empire being taken over. But it didn't feel like that because it was all on this one planet. And you didn't get this great sense of like why this suddenly means a third of the galaxy is like gonna be on Voltron's side again. Just because like while they're trying to do the Star Wars Rebel type thing, at least Star Wars Rebels has had like 3-4 seasons of setup to like these moments. Here it's been like a couple of episodes to get to this point. So overall, for right now with this season, having just watched it the one time, I think the big takeaways are that the best episodes from this season are the first two, I think, for sure. The Pidge episode is I think, a standout one. I still like the first episode with Keith and Shiro, the focus on those two, in that I feel it could pay off quite well once they commit to whatever they're going to actually do with Keith going forward, the next time he has a focus episode. And then, as much as I think it was mishandled this season, I think Luthor's stuff could pay off quite well. But again, I think that's the case with a lot of things with this show. It's all about waiting. Like, oh wait, they should do this now, but no, they're going to keep us waiting for this season. What about that? No, they're going to keep us waiting. So it felt like this was another season where like we didn't really get the answers we wanted to. And it was a similar thing to season 2, which I think was quite similar, that it brought up more questions, didn't really answer anything. Season 3 actually answered some of those questions while presenting other ones and was actually really, really, really good. This season was like, okay, you answered like one thing basically. Matt came back and that was great in that episode. But then didn't really do all that much after that point. So definitely a mixed bag of a season this time out. I wouldn't quite go as far to say like it's bad or just that the series has become a complete mess. But the writers need to get this back on track sooner rather than later. They need to create some form of an endpoint about like what's actually happening here. And I think a lot of that involves just what is the issue between Luthor and Zarkon, because apart from just this idea of like Zarkon wakes back up and he's just like, oh, Luthor's handled things badly. What's the issue? Like, we know that he was roughly banished, but for what? Like, you should have told us that this season. And now it's all being put on the next season, so I don't know. It's just their timing and when they decide to reveal things and when they decide to be very, very tight with information, I think is really, really all over the place. So, you know, it's a really high quality series. The animation is great from Studio Mir, of course. It's just the writing at times goes from being really, really good to just awful. Like, this is the same series that has done the whole Keith is Galra, let's not show you anyone's reaction to him being Galra. And it felt like there was a few moments like that this season of just, okay, whatever you're doing, guys. So, yeah, I still enjoy the show, you know, but this was a pretty disappointing end to the season, even if there's still some good stuff to look forward to. Thankfully, we know that there's still a load of episodes still to come, so they must have a lot of ideas and time to finally resolve a lot of these plots. It's just, you know, they need to, you know, be clearer about what exactly is happening, present more of a plot. But yeah, before I start repeating myself, I'm going to end it there. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on these 3 episodes and just the season overall. What were your favourite episodes from this season, favourite moments, and just in general, what are your thoughts? Do you agree with me that it started off well, but then kind of over time went down, or did you like the season in full? But yeah, give me your thoughts in the comments. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.